Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dexter New Blood. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I need to talk about the Deb stuff. I continue to love what they're doing with it. I keep bringing it up every episode, but I really think it's such a neat way to distinguish between Deb in Dexter's head versus Harry. I mean, the way Deb talks to him is very much like how Deb would talk to him. Just like the way Harry would talk to him is the way Harry would talk to him. But I also love that, like, anytime he sees her, she's manifesting herself as, like, it's not just like, I'm seeing Deb. It was never like that with Harry where he'd see people replaced with Deb. So, like, he's talking to the principal and she's like, yeah, Dexter, tell her how it's like the fact that you abandoned your child and everything. And then later on, when he's talking to her in the bathroom, she's in the form, like, she's in Angela's uniform and he's like pressing him against, like, he's never had such a volatile voice in his head, and I love it. Because, like, you know, Harry just kind of, like, he called Dexter out on some stuff, but Deb has always been one to calling him out on his shit, even like, near the end. But it's like, I love that the fact is that, like, she's all about that. And even later on, she is brainstorming. It's like, oh, we got to do something with Matt's body. How about the frozen lake? You know, that'll be more comfortable for you. It's like, no, like, the fact of the matter is, it's only a matter of time before, like, someone fishes out one of Matt's limbs. I was like, oh, the cemetery. It's like, no, the ground's frozen over. She's like, oh, I got an idea. And she throws him in, like, a wood chipper, and she's just celebrating as it, like, the blood spraying over the course of, like, a whole bunch of students walking by, and he just turns on the windshield wipers. Kind of very Fargo, isn't it? And it's just kind of, I love that. I love that so much. I'm like, I like there's just this dark humor to that. And, like, once again, I think it's such, I love the, like, artistic liberties they're taking with Deb versus they did with Harry. I think that's so, like, in an effed up way, it's kind of fun. But then she's also asking, like, right, are you going to kill again? He's like, no, I want to get rid of this Matt situation. And then, you know, because he even describes it. He's like, I slipped up. I made a mistake. I killed someone. Like, you know, it's just like, oh, why should I be punished for this one? Like, I love that he still justifies his head. Like, oh, I slipped up a little bit by killing someone. But obviously, he's still got cops all over his property, especially because they were about to wrap things up until Kirk showed up last episode. It's like, no. There's got to be something more to this. So, and I love Dexter finding out, like, well, first and foremost, there being there's cameras. Luckily, the cameras aren't all over the woods. Sadly, Angela didn't know about it. Neither did Dexter. And so because of that, he thought, I mean, he's been living there a while, but even he wasn't aware of the woods. It's basically to keep track of the animals. So it's only heat-seeking signatures instead of, like, actual, like, footage. So luckily they couldn't see Dexter, but they're able to make it, like, they're able to be like, okay, that weapon this person has, is that Matt's? And it's like, yeah, we can't tell who this other person is. So now it turns into a criminal investigation because now Kurt's pissed. He's like, wait, you just thought my boy was missing and now you're turning. And she's like, yes, that's how investigations work. You collect more evidence and things shift. But then Angela does beat herself up about it later on because she's like, right, I found one missing glove, and I just thought, like, what was I thinking just ending things like there? And Dexter's thinking to himself, you're thinking what I wanted you to think? You know, so it's like, right, that's the problem. Like, Angela's really good at what she did. She is a good cop. Because he thought, like, oh, man, like, they had that other dude that's kind of like the bumbling cop. Like, Logan's good at what he does, and so does Angela. I even love Dexter being like, right, I'm going to get caught by 3 small-town cops. It's like, I love that. I mean, you shouldn't underestimate anyone. I mean, Dokes found out about you. LaGuerta found out about you. Like, come on. So, I mean, you shouldn't underestimate him. But I guess, like, in his mind, he knows, like, Dokes and LaGuerta were good at what they were doing. It's like, these are 3 small-town cops. They've never dealt with anything like me or anything like this before, you know? So, they've never had to deal with a monster hiding in plain sight, which there's twofold of that in this town they're just not aware of. We'll get to that soon enough. But I love that, just him freaking out the moment he meets Damien. Because at first he's like, oh, he's smiling because, oh, Damien's this bubbling, like, guy. But then the moment it's like, oh, Damien's all, the blood tells the truth. I'm like, you see Dexter worry. He's like, oh, God. He's like, Damien, fail me now. Because Damien's good. He's Dexter good. He's like, he literally lays out the scene and Dexter's like, shit. Because it's like, he's like, oh, yeah, Matt would have fell back. There should be a rock here. They must have done it to clean. It was like, this guy got you. It's like, he's like, I am slipping in my abstinence. I'm not killing. Like, I lost my edge. I was on top of it. I was on top of my game. I'm slipping. I'm almost a novice. It's like I'm a teenager again at doing this killing thing. I'm like, man, that is, you know, And I think that's so perfect because it's like, right, you lost an edge or two. Like, you just got so caught up in the moment and you thought you had it all figured out. But, you've been slipping every step of the way, and that most likely will get you caught. Because now the thought is like, right, they have to move Matt's body especially because the dog's sniffing around. Luckily, Dexter grabbed Matt's jacket, put it all over the blood at the crime scene, and dragged it all over the place so that when the dogs are like sniffing out later on, they're all over the place. They keep circling the same place over and over. I am curious. There's something interesting about Kurt. He took an interest when Angela was saying, like, right, they were expanding the perimeter even to the iron mines. He's like, wait, you're going that far out? You think Matt's there? It's like, yeah, like he could have taken shelter there. Because he was getting on Angela, like, oh, you're sounding like a real cop now. And she's like, regardless of what you think, I am doing the best that I can. I am doing my job. I'm getting everyone involved. There's like 60 volunteers being there, which one had said volunteers ended up being Jamie Chung. Because I forgot, like, I saw her name in like the casting. I was like, Jamie Chung. She's playing a podcaster named Molly, which is like, oh, cool, she's a murder podcaster. Last thing you need is her to draw too much attention. It's like, yeah, it's a small town thing where everyone's in the know. That's bad enough. You get a podcaster like sniffing around too. It's like, cool. Last thing you want is any form of media coverage here, especially with you in hiding, and that could blow up your spot. I don't know if Harrison's in the same boat or not, because like there's stuff about his past. He's like, yeah, I'd rather kind of not talk about that. I'd rather not have cops up in my business. So there's something there where, once again, whether I'm still leaning more towards, yes, this is Harrison, but like I said, this is the third episode in a row. I still get that gut feeling like maybe he's not. But it might just be like, no, they're setting Harrison up to be like Dexter. I mean, kind of what he was hoping to do last season with Zach, right? Well, I try to make him like, oh, you be my protege. I mean, to be fair, like, working with another person hasn't always worked out. I mean, Julia Stiles' character, she kind of walked away after she got her revenge. I mean, I think things ultimately kind of worked out with Hannah. Still kind of sucks, R.I.P. Hannah. I mean, let's face it, he killed his own brother, too. Once again, I think that's for the show. I think I remember years ago, I've never read the books, but I think I remember years ago, like, he didn't actually kill his brother. Maybe he did, but later on. Like, I know the circumstances of his brother played out way differently in the book. I know the books are, like, quite different from the show. So I just don't remember. Because I don't even know, like, I have to look into, I don't even know if the books are still being written or whether, like, the book is done. The books are done. So I'm curious, I'm just curious, like, how, like, they compare to, like, later seasons and stuff like that. I haven't looked into it in years since, like, the show was originally running. It's, like, the last time I read up on, like, some of the differences. So it's been a while, so. Especially, like, how the original series ended versus, like, the books. Like I said, if the books are done. I haven't even looked into it because I don't know if they're still ongoing or maybe they're finished. Maybe they finished up years ago, too. Tangents and all that aside. My point is, you definitely see a darker side of Harrison, and there's been hints to that darker side. I mean, Dexter became what he became because he was sitting in his mother was chainsawed, and, like, I mean, that's also why he cuts people. It's like, it's part of his psychology, like his modus operandum of just like, not necessarily that, but just like how he operates and the way he slices bodies. I mean, it's disposable, but it's also like, right, he witnessed that happen to his mom. Him and his brother were sitting in his mom's blood for like days in that container. So Harrison losing his mom, losing his other mom, and not having his dad around, of course, is going to jack you up, and potentially growing up in the foster care system, which I love that the principal shades him of being like, oh, maybe now you get to know your son. And like, Dexter's just like, because I was like, man, the principal threw mad shade at you because it's like, oh, why'd your son's GPA go from like 3.8 to like a 1.5 or 2 to back to a 3.0? And he's like, oh yeah, my stepmom died. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then she throws mad shade at him, like, because it's like, oh, Jim, I didn't know you had a son. Because that conversation comes up because it's like, oh yeah, Jim's never mentioned having a son. And it's like, yeah, it's not really worth going into because he's talking to Audrey about that later on. So I think that's kind of interesting. But obviously, like, Harrison got called out for like, oh, you're potentially cheating on a test. And he was like, he had to retake it. And Jim didn't. He's like, yeah, Jim, thanks for having my back. Like always. But he took the test again and he got even higher. It's like, oh, no, like, Harrison's actually really smart. I mean, Dexter's smart in his own right, too. So I don't know if maybe they went over this in the original series. Like, once again, I have not seen the original first couple seasons. I only watched season 8 for the first time, like I brought up before this a new series started. But I've not seen the original seasons of the show since they originally aired. So I don't remember if they ever really went into Dexter's background or like how well he did in school and stuff like that. So like, is Harrison some of Dexter rubbing off on Harrison of like, oh yeah, like he's apparently like super smart. But like I said, tapping into that dark side, we find out like, wasn't that dude's name Zach? Maybe that's what I'm confusing the name Zach for. I'm blanking on or am I thinking the actor's name? The actor who played the kid in season 7. I said his name, I want to say like episode 1 or 2, and I'm blanking on it now. I've got just so many names running through my head. Regardless, it turns out people are catfishing Ethan, and Harrison doesn't appreciate that. And he tells Ethan, he's like, yeah, they're catfishing. He's like, why are you even telling me that? Like, who are you? He's like, I'm the new kid. But he also was like, right, I don't like, people on top. Like, he's like, the food chain, like, the dynamic of, like, the food chain needs to change. And so he makes fun of, like, home dude by Ethan, like photoshops him, like, fucking an animal or something like that. And the guy gets pissed. And then Harrison grabs him by the throat. It's just like, okay, leave Ethan alone or I'm going to do this to you every single day. And I love Matt, like, the other guy comes over to him. He's like, what? You want something? And then, like, Angela kind of came and diffused the situation. And I love Harrison being like, oh yeah, besides, Coach Logan said that I made the team, so see you guys on the mat. I'm like, yeah, look at you being a badass. But I guess, like, because he grew up in foster care and just, like, how, rough that can be sometimes, just probably the nature of, like, the other kids trying to punk you because you're smaller. Not every kid's going to be like that, but every kid's, kids come from different backgrounds and situations, so he probably had to learn how to defend himself, and maybe some of the homes he grew up in were crappy, so I mean, he did try to defend Jim in front of the situation. It's like, right, my stepmom died, and so my dad couldn't get in contact with me. So, yeah, he tried to make, because it seemed like, oh, how come you didn't mention your son, and why is this, like, why don't you know anything about your son? It's like, yeah, like, because Harrison's like, right, I don't want you digging too deeply into our situation because it's none of your business, and I don't want you up in my business, so I got to make my dad look good so you won't be looking, like, poking eyes into our business, so it is interesting, like, there is resentment there, but he's also covering his bases. I guess, like, he's playing the role of a good con man of, like, yeah, I'm keeping this up because, like, I'll play the role of Harrison, but it's like, maybe I have my own ulterior motives for being here. Maybe it is just simply reconnecting with my dad for the first time since I was a little kid. Who knows? Maybe. There definitely does seem like there's definitely more, there's a lot more to Harrison's situation. But even later on, Ethan is showing him all the stuff that he's doing, you're like, okay. I'm not saying this lightly. In no shape or form am I saying this like, is it like, oh, try. It's like, no, like, Ethan definitely, they've set him up to be like, he seems like the, do stuff dangerously out of school. I don't even want to say the exact words just because I don't want that to, but I'm like, he definitely seems like he's fitting that bill, especially because they talk about it like, apparently, like, they've been giving Ethan shit since they were in elementary school. And, like, all the visceral stuff he drew. And then you see Harrison's reaction. He's almost smiling. Like, he's almost like, yeah. So I'm like, yeah, a little bit of Dexter's proclivities have probably rubbed off on him. Plus, like, growing up under his circumstances. I think a lot of that. Like, I mean, Dexter got fueled because of his circumstances. So I think the same thing has happened to Harrison in some shape or form. So who knows if Harrison's done what Dexter's done in some shape or form. Like, he might have killed someone. And that maybe we just haven't gotten to that point yet of him, like, disclosing that information. But maybe that's also why he doesn't want cops up in his information. Because he did talk about the fact is that he went from Argentina to Miami. I'm surprised he never, and I think this is so fascinating. Like, they keep writing around him. I'm like, I'm surprised you never reached out to, like, Jamie or anything like that. Like, that's what I, like, cause she was your babysitter at one point in time. Like, you do have people there who do care about you. You could have gone to Angel or Jamie, but the fact, maybe, they wrote around that. Because, I mean, this could have easily been filmed, like they could have been writing this or filming this, because who knows, like, maybe they had stuff at it, because I know, like, obviously Amy Garcias was working on Lucifer probably around the time this was being filmed, so maybe she couldn't, so, like, that's why I'm like, maybe they couldn't get in contact with people, like, people's scheduling couldn't match up, so they had to write around certain things, because they haven't touched on that, because you were living in Miami, so it's like, you never looked up Jamie or Angel. I mean, I guess, like, maybe he did, and maybe he just was like, oh, hey, everyone's under the impression his dad is dead, except, well, he ended up finding out the truth, but it was, like, not until, like, after his mom died, so I don't know. Well, till after Hannah died, but I don't know. That's probably, like, the outside potential of, like, why we probably won't get to see too many familiar faces. I mean, just because, like, they're trying to separate things, because, like, those are people connected to Dexter's past life, but they could always make some small cameo appearances or references here and there, like, knowing, like, what's up with them. Audrey doesn't seem like she's scared of him, because he was like, oh, does that freak you out? And she's like, no. So I think that makes Harrison kind of like happy, like, right, my dark side doesn't scare you. But I'm curious, like, what his father's conversation with him last episode, I wonder, does that impact him at all this episode, with some of that thinking of like, right, this is my darker side, and could that have been what my dad was referencing? Like, well, he was referencing specifically himself, so what could be like so bad about him that he had to stay away from me? But Audrey talks about her circumstances. She doesn't know about her birth mother and kind of doesn't care, because her birth mother kind of abandoned her. Her dad died, I think, before she was born or something like that. But she does have her dad's guitar. So obviously, going back to the fact is Angela isn't her biological mom, but she's still her mom in her eyes. But the car breaks down, and she sends Harrison for help, and I'm like, oh, don't do that. Don't be by yourself. And lo and behold, who rolls up? Your boy Edward, and he's offering help and stuff like that. But she's like, no, if you really want to help, stop fucking killing the planet. And he's like, yeah, but the fact is you're using a gas-guzzling vehicle, so some people might call you a hypocrite. I don't. He's like, the fact is people are complicated. He brought that up last episode of like, right, that younger generations tend to see the world in black and white and good and evil when there are complexities. People are complex. I mean, look at Dexter. You, in one perspective, you'd be like, oh, he's true evil. Other perspectives, you'd be like, well, he's good to some extent because he's just killing bad guys, but that doesn't justify. So it's like, yeah, he's in that complicated gray area. Some people can see him that way. Other people are like, no, you're a murderer. You're a serial killer. So there's that. But him rolling up on Angela like that, I was like, he's definitely got to be the one, because he finally killed that girl. He let her go. The moment he let her go and she was running, I was like, and the way he's dressed up like that, I'm like, he's going hunting. It could be someone else, but my money's on it being Edward. I mean, it just seems like it's meant to be obvious. I mean, he's the billionaire. It's like, you know, once again, another monster hiding in plain sight. So, but he gives her a leeway and puts her down. And then we see later on, I guess he's embalming her. I'm not fully aware of the embalming process. I think you have to I think you do have to just naturally release all the blood so that you can replace it with embalming fluid. So the question is, what is he doing with the bodies? Now, my thought was, we know that Dexter was going to the cave, that being a potential place to dump the body, didn't have an opportunity to. But there was a deep hole that I was almost wondering when he threw the rock down, would he hear it thud against something? But no, because at first I was like, could that be where Home Dude is dumping the bodies of the women? Because they still like, there's been a lot of missing women that they haven't been able to find the bodies of. So I'm wondering, could that be like his dumping ground essentially? Because even Dexter was like enjoying it. He was like, the peace and tranquility. It was like being back on his boat. The moment that scene played out and the bears showed up, I was like, yeah, didn't have to worry about that in Miami. It's like maybe sharks, but even he's like, yeah, the only thing I had to worry about was alligators. Because I don't know if Miami really gets that many sharks like in that particular lane and in that particular area. But that's what he enjoyed about his boat: the peace and tranquility, the privacy, the solitude. Granted, not as much privacy with cops literally tramping all over your all over your property, looking for the dead body that's literally underneath their feet. Well, they don't know he's dead necessarily. They just know like something potentially happened to him. Especially when they eventually get the blood results back, and yep, it's a familial match for Kurt. So Dexter couldn't necessarily throw the body down. Audrey and Harrison did go to go pick up some meat from the butcher and talk to Gig, and they found out about the deer that Matt killed. And obviously for Audrey, she doesn't like it being like, yeah, this beautiful creature's being like, and it's going to just be tossed away like nothing. So she talks about it like, because her mom was like, no, I support you wanting to do something, you know. It's like, right, letting the Seneca people know, like, right, like Angela knows, she's still in that caught in that middle ground. It's like, right, I'm not trying to go against you, I'm on your side, just let me be there for you. And so Audrey and them like help with the whole, and Dexter and Harrison help with the returning the deer to them so that they could, you know, because it's like, right, show the animal proper respect. Don't just like keep it in the freezer and immediately dispose of it. It's no longer evidence, so it's fine. So that in turn did give Dexter the idea of like, hey, up in smokes, I can cremate Matt's remains and puts it in like a furnace. Good, done. Now I get to go back to my life. But then he was also wondering, like, right, is this situation a byproduct of me killing, or is this actually a byproduct of me not killing for so long? Like, you know, that me not killing is actually going to be the ultimate hindrance here and not the fact is I killed. I'm surprised Deb didn't come up being like, what the hell are you thinking? Stop. She'll still probably call him out for that stuff in the future. But, what I thought was fascinating is that Dexter did run into a drunk Kurt, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I contact my boy," and you're like, "What?" Like, even I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, "Yeah, I FaceTime with him too." I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And even Dexter's like, "But why would he lie about that?" Like, he's like, "Yeah, he's like unbelievable." And even I'm thinking like, it sure is unbelievable because Dexter literally just cremated your son's remains, so there's no way he's still alive. So I'm like, why is he lying? So it has to tie back because the moment he hung up with Angela when she was talking about expanding the search to the mines, he got off the phone. He's like, God damn. I'm like, he has something to hide. Something there he has to hide. So I didn't talk about it either, but like I brought up like Logan. Logan's questioning Dexter like, oh, so people saw you hunting. He's like, yeah, no, I wasn't hunting. I go hiking. With a gun? He's like, oh yeah, for protection. And it's like, yeah, what gun is this? He's like, oh yeah, it's this particular gun. Like a whole bunch of other people have it. He's like, uh-huh. Yeah, what's your alibi? He's like, yeah, I was at the cabin alone. He's like, anything heated between you and Matt at the party? He's like, no, blah, 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 blah. And Logan's like, nah, we're good. I'm like, I need to keep an eye on Logan. That guy's, maybe that's just for the purpose of the show, because he's got that look on his face like, he's serious, and he's like, no, we're good. See, it was painless. Yep, didn't even feel a thing. So I'm like, definitely gonna have to be on your toes around this, because there's no way you're gonna just stop with one murder, Dexter. I mean, especially because we've got a serial killer on the loose, and he's right up your alley for being the perfect victim. So it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. But I did like that moment with him, Angela, Audrey, and Harrison at dinner. He was like, right, I almost messed this up with killing. It's like a family I thought I'd lost. Like, he hasn't had this in a long time. The last person, well, prior to Hannah, like the last time he had this was with Rita, and being with Hannah again, he almost had that again. And it's like, now, like, I'm around this family environment. He's like, I don't want to mess this up. I don't want to like ruin this. So that's even more motivation not to kill. But then it's like, right, but me not killing might be an issue, because it might make me, like, when the time comes, if I'm not flexing that muscle enough, like, that might cause me enough issues, because it's like, right, I'm so wound up tight because I haven't killed, I haven't like given into my urges in 10 years, and that's why the Matt thing happened, and I was super sloppy, so he's like, maybe it's better to be killing than not killing at all, so granted, he's got the perfect, because he heard the gunshots, and he said, yeah, I gotta be careful not to be prey out here in these woods while someone else was being prey. So we'll see how that ultimately all plays out. Because that means it's relatively, that killer's like hunting ground. I mean, a gunshot could probably echo pretty far. I don't know how far that can, but if it's enough for like it to be close enough proximity to the crime scene and stuff that Dexter's like, oh, like he could hear it. Like that means it had, like, that guy's hunting ground has to be relatively close to Dexter's in some shape or form. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see ultimately where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.